Hello and welcome to the Salt of the Earth podcast. I am your host, Thomas Pope, and this is my other host,
Jonathan Cobb.
And today we have a guest whose name is
Benjamin Pope.
He's my brother.
Well, technically you were my brother first.
Well, he's the first Pope.
He's the third Pope.
I'm the third Pope, but I'm older than him.
Yeah.
So Benjamin is our guest today, and today we're going to kind of talk about some of the things he's, been through in the past, dealing with, hardship and fun things in life that aren't actually that fun. So I guess to start it off, you've had to deal with a lot of hardship or tough times during your life, both like financially or with like medical stuff. Do you want to just kind of give a short overview of some of those?
Sure, my life has been tough. No, but it's all relative, right? How hard your life is or what things are tough. But yeah, there's been tough things. Probably what I'm guessing you're thinking of is cancer at 21, stage 3 colon cancer, and then all the bills that came with that. I can't. It's been about 10 years now, so I can't remember the exact number, but it was $200,000 some dollars of medical bills at the time. But then just other things, jobs and financial instability when it comes to having jobs and trying to get through school and stuff. But
broken collarbone, broken toe.
collarbone, but those things, those happen.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting about you, because a lot of people go through tough things, but you're also a preacher, so it's kind of fun to it's kind of cool to look back on different things you've gone through and look at them in retrospect and then kind of bring a lesson from them, which you have done.
Yeah, so with anyone's troubles, I think the first thing when you have hardships, you need to be able to look at it as an opportunity to grow. Like, how can I be stronger for this? How can I be better as far as maybe relating to other people who have problems in their life? Like, I've been through stuff, so I can understand what they're going through. And then if you're willing to accept it, if you have difficulties, you should be, so how can God be glorified through this? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is a really tough situation. Let's not waste it. Let's find a way to make something good come out of it. And I don't know why. I don't know if I take too much credit for it, but for some reason, early on, I kind of started with that mindset. I was like, well, here's something that's not fun. What are the good things I can get at? Like, how can I take this and become stronger through it? Or how can I take it and use it to something good for the kingdom? That might be a witness to other people or give them encouragement in some way.
Mm-hmm. So you just kind of had that mentality starting fairly young?
No, I probably, starting about the time that cancer mostly, probably around then.
Mm-hmm. So is that kind of mentality of seeing tough things as a way to grow and to try to find the best in it? Is that kind of what got you through going through cancer and doing all the chemo, which made you feel horrible and stuff?
Yeah, well, going back to all the troubles. I figure for most people, they'd say, "Oh, you had cancer. That's probably the worst of it." It's probably not the hardest thing for me. Looking at all the different troubles, cancer was not the worst one. If I'm being honest, it was probably more the last 3 years where I was working full time and then some, and also going to school. But I've kind of learned that there's really 3 different types of hardships. So there's some hardships where, well, like with cancer, I was working at Subway and Red Lobster. I don't have any career. I don't have any income. So to one, be faced with colon cancer, and then 2, to be faced with, a debt that really, $30,000, maybe I could work hard and I could pay it off, but 200 some thousand, it's out of my hands. And so one response to hardships is to kind of just let it go. And to be honest, I had a lot of peace when it came to having like the cancer diagnosis and stuff. Like I'm being honest, I'm not just trying to put a brave face on something that already happened, but like the chemo was really awful, the surgery was really awful, a lot of pain, but as far as mentally or spiritually, it was really easy to just have a lot of faith and a lot of peace. And Ephraim lately, my 5-year-old, he's had this saying where if we give him a job, he'll, if it's really a tough job, it's a lot of work, he'll say, "I surrender." Like I don't know where he learned that, but he's like, "I surrender." He says that, and I know what he's meaning. He's meaning this is tough. I don't want to do it anymore. Like I give up. I'm not wanting to fight this. But with cancer is one of those things where it's a hardship. I saw how it was completely out of my hands. Like cancer diagnosis, sure, people are going to say there's all these ways you could help, but for me, I'm like, okay, there's nothing I can do with the cancer. Either my body gets better or I don't. I'm doing the chemo. I'm doing what the doctor told me. So it's in his hands, and kind of the same thing for the money. It's like, all right, I'm not going to be able to pay off all this debt. I'll just live with it. And it's what God wants. I'll let God use it. So that's one way to look at hardship. And then I think another one is with some of these other hardships I've had where it's financial or it's something that's a little bit more feasible, where it's within the realm that you could do it. Like again, if my cancer bills were $30,000, that's something that maybe I could handle a little bit more. And so then there's the hardships where you get worn out by fighting for so long. And I think that it's helpful to remember that when you see people having hardships, there's a time where you say, well, you just need to trust in God, just give it to him, know that he has tomorrow. But the real hard thing was, year after year, every hour of every day working, like get home from work, start college classes, and no time for, anything, any type of leisure, no walks, no stuff like that, just always being busy. And I think that was a lot more difficult for me, because it wasn't something where I could just say, I surrender, I give it all to God. I still got to work. I have a family at this point. I still had to go to school. I had to get past it. So it was just kind of this constant soldiering on and doing the hard work that was more difficult for me.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting perspective because, so I guess that even though the cancer was, and the financial in relation to that was much worse than like working a lot, as far as it from outside perspective, it was easier because you just put it on God, is what you're saying, right?
Right. There was nothing I could have done to change the situation. Like even if it was a different health diagnosis, like if I had gone in and the doctor says, you have high blood pressure, you need to get in shape, that's different. That's something you're like, well, I have a part I can play. I could actually do something to fix this. But with cancer, it was just one of those things where, all right, there's nothing I can do. It's all in God's hands. So in some ways, it was made easier for me because there was no distraction or no illusion that I had a control over it. I was automatically confronted with the fact that I have no control or ability to overcome any of this.
I've heard you use that as kind of an example of our debt for Christ, for instance, because if that's another thing that we can't possibly pay, and I've heard you use that as kind of an illustration before, you had this much debt, it was just totally out of your hands. You had to, do several things, you had to make appeals and things, but ultimately it wasn't you who was able to, remove all that debt.
Right. And like 1 Peter 3, it's not baptism that now save us, but the appeal to God for a clean conscience. And I've mentioned before how I still have this letter that because I had all this debt and there's a lot of process of, looking for basically charity or some way to pay it off. And so to each one of my surgeons, to anesthesiologists, all these people, I was writing letters explaining my situation. I can't pay it off. can I get a discount, or can I get longer to pay it in some situations? And so I got a number of these letters where from a surgeon or a doctor, and they're like, we're writing off your debt. And say one surgeon's bill was just $18,000 or something, and then another's bill was $6,000 or whatever. It still adds up. And so when you get a letter like that, like, you made this appeal and you were humbled to the point where you're like, I can't deal with this. Please forgive this debt. And then they do. It's a really good illustration for Christianity, for what it means to have our sins forgiven. And sometimes even still, if we're sorting through boxes, I'll find these letters and some of the other stuff from when I had cancer, and it's just a good reminder. It's like, oh yeah, I remember what it felt like to get this letter. And I think as Christians, it'd be good for us to not just go through the actions of like communion every Sunday, but to really remember, is like, okay, yeah, what does it feel like, or what should it feel like, acknowledging what we've been forgiven of, just knowing that it was completely beyond our ability to repay this debt, but it was just written off for us.
Wow, yeah.
And for you, you have a very good, I guess, personal example of that kind of, well, like you were mentioning, trying to find things that you can learn from hardship or from the various things you went through. Is like you were able to learn and see this example of that kind of forgiveness that maybe a lot of people don't have quite as good of an example of in their lives.
I don't think I like, it's apparently I didn't learn it good enough, because then there was, with other hardships, or whether it's a car breaks down and we can't fix it, and someone lends me a car for like a whole year, which Luke did on a number of occasions, or the roof is leaking and can't pay to have it fixed, and then I go and check my bank account and or I go and check the electric bill and somebody has paid our electric bill. Like, I don't even know how you do that. You go and pay someone else's electric bill. But there's that verse, and I can't remember where it is in the New Testament, but owe nothing but to love one another. And so as much as going through cancer and having basically all of that $200,000 was donated by other people, like people I haven't even met, like in Christiana, I was in Germany, their church sent me like €3,000 deposit to pay bills, and other people I hadn't met, and doctors and hospitals and all this. I mean, I think I ended up paying like 17 grand of it myself.
Wow.
Wow.
And so you get that, but then there was more, I think, that came to me to be learned, because later on when I was having more troubles, like going through student teaching and knowing that for 5 months I wasn't going to have an income, and we had all these car problems on top of that, there was some people that anonymously, like, we'd go to open up our car and there'd be an envelope with cash in it on the seat of our car, or another person, they weren't anonymous, but I don't know if they want me to mention it, but they sent me a letter with like $500, and they said, here, we're going to give this to you now, and we're going to keep giving you this every month until you tell us that you don't need it anymore. And we're not going to ask what you're doing with it. We're going to give you this every month until you ask us to stop.
Wow.
Yeah, and those kind of things are really humbling. And like for me, I'm not the kind of person that likes help. Like even Saturday, I was rolling some big rocks up the hill to put around our flower bed. And if a car drove by on the road, I'd act like I was just leaning on it, because I want anyone to think that I am having a real difficult time like I was. I mean, these were big rocks, but I wouldn't want anyone to think that they needed to help me and then to offer. So there's kind of that pride. But when you find yourself in real need and people just make sacrifices willingly to benefit you, that is really like, it really brings you low. It really humbles you. It completely erases the potential for you to look back and say, I made it all because of my own hard work. And so hopefully I've learned that lesson now and can be done with some of these troubles for a while. Because I don't think I got it all on cancer, and it had to come back, and some of these other things, I had to learn them that way.
Well, something I think about is Well, Jesus' words, he who is forgiven much loves much.
Yeah, I read that just last week.
So, I mean, here all Christians have been forgiven, the greatest debt that could exist. You've been forgiven a lot of much comparatively smaller debts in life, but they're kind of serve as a good example of what it feels like to just undeservedly, like randomly be forgiven,
And like I said, the good things that you can get out of hardship, you can realize that you need to place your faith in God because it's out of your control. You can grow stronger and have a greater endurance to handle these things in the future, but also you can learn how to empathize and understand with other people. And so for me, I think if I see someone struggling now, I realize that there's these three things that could, three ways they could be facing this challenge. One way they might just say, you got to put this in God's hands. I'll pray with you. I'll be here to comfort you. But this is in God's hands. We need to trust in Him. Other times, you might just have to be there, and especially with newer converts or Christians who are weak and maybe facing addictions or something, and you just have to say, all right, I know it's not fun, but you got to do the work. Christianity has challenges, and I know it doesn't seem like a nice thing to say, but whether it's with kids or people who are having other problems in life, sometimes you get through hardships by working hard, and it makes you stronger. But then the third way is realizing that being there for somebody, or just what might be a small sacrifice for you, can completely change the situation for someone else. Like $500 is still a lot of money, but there are times in my life, and I'm sure probably more to come, where $500 for me is fun money or something, but for somebody else it completely changes the course of their year, and whether they make it or break it. So it's good to remember those things, that we live in a world where a lot of people are asking for handouts. But sometimes there are people that are just completely exhausting themselves through constant work, and they're not asking for something, but they still need it. And so just to kind of be aware and looking out for people and understanding that, yeah, I know what that's like to be there. How can I help them?
That's good advice. So, so I guess moving on a little bit from that, I wanted to ask, what are some of the ways, you've kind of maybe already mentioned that, but what are some of the ways that, going through tough times has kind of molded you and made you who you are?
Well, I mean, in the simplest form, when you're a young kid, you don't want to work. I remember first job in high school, and having a 4-hour shift in a day, I was 4 hours from my day. And then going into the jobs where you're working 12 or even 15-hour shifts, you learn to endure more. And so I think hardships are like that. And maybe, I won't say never, maybe there's some people who can end up being a strong adult without going through hard times. But that's rare, I think. I think if a person is going to be a strong person, they have to learn to get through difficulties, which is tough with kids, because you look at a kid and you're like, I don't want them to have to go through what I went through. At the same time, my ultimate goal is that they end up being a strong person.
Yeah.
Not that they have an easy life.
Yeah, I've actually talked about this on the podcast before, how it's easy for people to, in a worldly desire, to want their kids to have an easy life. But sometimes that could come at the cost of having a weak faith.
Well, just being weak in general.
Or just being weak in general. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, because if you're really concerned about somebody's character in there, then making an easy life for them is not.
And if you're studying with someone, I've studied with people who were maybe new converts, and there's the feeling like I want to carry them. They're really struggling with this. I want to carry them through that. At the same point, just kind of saying that they've got to learn to stand on their own. They can't stay walking with me as their crutch. They've got to do more and have some expectations, some personal responsibility if they're ever going to be strong. So,
Yeah.
And as a father, or even as someone working in a congregation, I mean, you don't just intentionally make people's lives miserable, but you have to think, okay, so where's a challenge that this person is ready to handle, or trying to challenge people like, okay, this is going to be tough for them to get through, but this will be a good chance for them to grow stronger and maybe a good task for them to work on.
Just constantly raising the bar for them a little bit.
Yeah.
And encouraging them to grow, kind of encouraging / slightly pushing them to grow, maybe.
In school, they call it scaffolding. So with kids, you try and think, what is the extent to this kid is possible of accomplishing with help? So you don't give them an assignment that's completely beyond their ability, and thankfully God doesn't do that. But what are they capable of accomplishing or dealing with help, and planning that? But usually life's hard enough on its own. You don't have to introduce fake hardships. It'll come.
Yeah.
But training kids to be able to handle them once they come.
So what are some ways you think people could be trained, or you think people should be trained? So like what are ways like parents could train kids, or like more mature Christians could maybe train younger Christians to be able to handle the tougher times, both physically and spiritually, better?
Well, I think a good Bible knowledge and foundation, so you have something to fall back on when there's tough times, that those verses in the moment just come back to you, and you're like, okay, God has made this promise, or there's this person in the Old Testament who got through difficult times. But maybe even more than that is example. If you have seen a Christian who has really just gone through a lot and keeps going, that's a good encouragement to you as well. To know that what I have is not nearly as bad as what other people have had, and they've kept going. And then just to keep going through and saying, whatever happens, let God be glorified.
Yeah, that's the most powerful thing you can give somebody, is personal examples, or seeing somebody you know going through something is the most powerful way you can learn, I suppose. And
just having someone in your life, I guess, to kind of give that example of, here's someone who's sticking through it, not someone who's not giving up.
Right. Or I think a person needs to be able to see somebody who's made sacrifices for their faith. If someone just goes through their life and for some reason they're not being challenged, well, probably they're not really growing in their faith if there's never challenges. But if you just have a comfortable church existence where you grow up in the church and your family goes to church and you go every Sunday and everyone gets along and everything's great, I mean, that's easy to do when times are good. I mean, I think I'm probably quoting the wrong person from the book of Job. I think that's what Satan said. But, it's easy when times are good, but give them hardships and see how they respond. And so if you've seen somebody who went through real hard times and just kept the faith, that's a good example.
So like thinking of Job, like it wasn't the fact that he was a really great guy that is so impressive, or why.
I think he was, though.
He was a really great guy, but it's not just simply the fact that he was a really great guy that is impressive and makes me think of very highly of him, and think it's a really great, Job is a really great book. It's the fact that he was a really great guy, and then once everything was taken away from him, he continued that way. He didn't, just
And possibly part of it, like I
implode.
said, at least with that first really bad day he had where like all his camels were stolen and all his kids died, it was one of those things where it's, what can I do? It's all in God's hands. Or like David, when Bathsheba's son died, and he was really fasting and everything while the kid was sick, and then once the kid died, he kind of just washed his face and went about his business because it was out of his hands, and just kind of that acknowledgement. So Job probably felt some of that too. It's, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's all in God's hands. It wasn't that I've had hardships because I did stupid things before, but like with cancer, it's the way it is. I'm going to make sure that it ends up being for good, even if it's, bad and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess sometimes we can fight and then sometimes we can have to surrender. So
Yeah. Don't tell Ephraim that though. He's got to do his chores.
Surrendering. It's not surrendering in the sense of just totally giving up, but surrendering control.
Surrendering to God.
Right, and we've tried to him. Surrender means this is hard. I don't want to fight anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's becoming an increasing problem in society where suicide. People are like, this is hard. I don't want to fight anymore, and they do that. But yeah, surrendering, giving control. This is hard. I can't do it. It's all in God's hands now, and I'll do my part and try to make the best of it on my end, but ultimately God's in control.
It's a very different thing from giving up, because you're not giving up. You're just saying, okay, you know what? My own power cannot take it the full way. I'm giving up control. I'm not just giving up. I'm trusting in God that it will work out, and I don't need to be the one who makes it work out, I guess.
Yeah. And when I had cancer, there was kind of a neat way to do that, because they asked me if I wanted to be on this research study for people with colon cancer. And there's 3 options where you'll be randomly selected. Either you will take this certain medication while doing chemo, you will take a placebo, a sugar pill while you're doing the chemo, or you'll be selected to not do chemo and take this medication. And so I was like, sign me up. It's completely random. Computer's going to pick. And so then whatever God wants, I do. And I ended up taking some pill, whether it was a real pill or not, I don't know, but I took it for 3 years. And I haven't died yet. But
yeah.
But it was just another way for me to say, yeah, because I've told you guys before, I was just bombarded with different people telling me how to beat cancer, and I was like, you know what, this is beyond me. What happens, and I guess you were pretty young when that happened, though.
I remember it fairly well, I guess.
I remember it.
You were 12?
Maybe. I forget the exact year, but
well, I was 21, so you were probably 12.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's default response, though, to when they see somebody else going through hardship is, here's how you get through it. They give a bunch of advice. They try to solve it for you, almost.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is helpful, and sometimes is kind of just distracting. I guess, I don't know. But
yeah, it's tough to know what to say about that, because there are times where someone's going through hardship and they really need to hear the advice that someone else has to give them. I mean, I know that usually you don't want to hear somebody giving you a lecture when life is tough, but there are times when I think you need it.
Mm-hmm. I guess you just have to exercise discernment to know when.
Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom, knowing when to tell a person, well, you just got to step it up, man up, do the work, or knowing when to be the person that puts $500 on their car seat.
Mm-hmm. Because
yeah,
either one can work in the right moment. I know, an example would be one of William, another one of our brothers. When I broke my ankle, his advice was, Just walk it off. You'll be fine.
Well,
Just walk it
he
off.
just doesn't like you.
And I mean, yeah, maybe not.
When I had cancer, he bought me a laptop because I couldn't walk up the stairs.
Well, that was nice of him.
Yeah. So it just, I mean, he just doesn't like you.
Different times, I guess, but like, so there's certain times when like that advice, maybe it's just plain bad advice for starters. When someone has a broken ankle, they can't just walk it off. But yeah, there's a time for advice and there's a time for gifts or some other form of help.
Yeah, I've noticed that some people don't like being prayed with either. Like, they see that as an insult. Like, I don't want your prayers. Don't pray for me. As if it's easy to interpret, oh, all they're doing is praying. They must not really care. They're just trying to excuse themselves from actual, real help in any way. But people shouldn't see that way. I mean, I hope they don't. But, like, I got quite a few people that donated money when I had cancer, but far more than that was I got letters of people saying they're praying for me. And again, letters from people I'd never even heard of. I didn't even know. Like,
Yeah.
we know somebody who knows somebody who told people in their church. I'm like, I know nobody who goes to that church down in Texas. And yet I've had 3 letters from this congregation.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that is, I mean, I don't know if you don't really feel how powerful it is until you're actually on the receiving end, I feel like. Well, like, I don't know. Once when I was sick with Lyme's, I had the elders of the church prayed for me. That was pretty cool. And then another situation more recently, I've heard the same thing. It was like people you don't even know saying they're praying for you. But yeah, it's because it's more than just a gift. It's actually thinking about you, and if you really believe that prayer works, then you should be.
And if you are the person that comes across of don't pray for me, I don't want your condolences or your sympathy, that really makes it awkward for people to help you. Like maybe people shouldn't be, but they're worried of, oh, I would help them, but I don't want to offend them. Like what I learned, getting help is humbling, and if you're proud, it's hard to take help.
Yeah.
I mean, some people would rather not get help than be humbled. Like, there's this kind of, if I could have gone through all this schooling, like when I went back to get my licensure and going to school and working full time the whole way, and also, still being a dad and a husband and preaching, if I would have done all those things and been able to make it all on my own without ever receiving assistance from somebody else, that might be a matter of pride that, boy, I worked hard and I did that. But as it turned out, I have to say, I couldn't have done that without help from this person and this person.
I know that's it's an annoying thing. I remember as a kid, watching a movie or someone would be an old-fashioned, or there'd be like a mom or a family who would be like, oh, they'd be too proud to take charity or something. Like, we don't take charity. And it was always super frustrating for me.
It's real.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It was always super frustrating, even as just a kid seeing that, because like, you could have help. You could have the solution, but you're refusing it. So what would you say for people who are kind of caught in that amount of pride where they don't want to be helped?
It depends on how well you know the person, but maybe say, hey, I see what's going on here. I've been there before. Maybe, and this probably isn't a good, don't ever suggest why someone's going through a hard time, especially if they're a proud person. But maybe find a way of gently sharing from your example that maybe the reason things are tough is to humble you. And I think for me, I don't know God's plans, but for me, that's one of at least the last 3 years, that's one of the big things I've gotten out of it, is the humility side of things. So people are missing out. Like, they aren't looking for opportunities for bad things to lead to good things if they are not letting go of their pride.
And that goes right along in hand with, if they're not letting go of their pride, they're also probably not giving up control. Is they're still thinking that they can somehow get through it that they're strong enough or whatever to just get through it on their own. If they're not accepting help, they're probably not trusting as they should either. I would guess.
And that's one of the core principles to Christianity is realizing daily that you cannot do this on your own. And I guess people that haven't had an experience yet where they've had to have help, it's maybe hard for them to realize that. But you have to remember that you cannot do this on your own, and therefore that is why we are Christians.
Yeah. I mean, we can do a great many things. The more we are transformed to become like Christ, we are capable of doing a lot. But in the end, there's that verse in 1 Corinthians where these people are kind of bragging about, oh, I was baptized by so-and-so, or whatever it was. They were kind of placing themselves in tiers above one another. And Paul writes to them, what do you have that you did not receive? And what do you know that you were not taught? So whatever you have, you know a lot of scriptures, or you've learned a lot. Well, somewhere down the line, you got something from somebody. Either you were taught the scriptures, or you were lucky enough to have the Bible available to you, or someone showed mercy to you, and definitely God showed mercy to us. But just coming to realize that, yeah, whatever I have, I didn't earn it. And I can't remember who it was, but there was a preacher long ago, I think in England or something, and he sees these people being led off to execution, and he says, there, but for the grace of God go I. Meaning that different life situations, that would have been me. If I would have been randomly born into the household of meth addicts, I wouldn't be where I am now. The fact that I know the scriptures and stuff, that was the biggest winning the lottery that a person could have. I didn't do anything to earn that, to be placed in a situation where I would hear the Bible a lot growing up, or know people who know the Bible. So,
and I think
be humble.
Being humble, and I think once you're able to take up that mentality in one area of your life, or just totally, then that's like the recipe to peace and just faith, I guess, is once you're able to just realize that everything is from God, and that ultimately, you might be doing some of the legwork, but it's all from God. I think that's a way to get a lot of peace.
And then when you realize that, when you come to other hard times, then you can fall back in that and realize that everything else I have has been given to me. Why will not this thing be given to me as well? Or be taken care of in this way?
Also, I think it's also just a great way to humble yourself, I guess, is if you can realize that, then you're not going to go around being proud. If you genuinely believe that everything you have is from God, then how can you be proud? So, for instance, there's one area where at least one area in my life where I've recognized this multiple times, is that car accidents or speeding tickets or anything like that. I haven't had any of them. I've been fortunate about that. And I recognize several times throughout my life is this is something that I could be really proud about. And every time I would think about it, I've never had a speeding ticket or whatever, I would think, well, really, if I think about it, that is not because I am such a fantastic driver. Because looking back on it, there have been a lot of times when I made mistakes or something where I easily could have gotten into a horrible accident, but just, by the grace of God, there happened not to be a car there, or I happened to be able to stop on the slippery ice or something like that. So something like that is an area where people could very easily be proud about it, and a lot of people will choose pretty petty things like that and start boasting about them. But I was able to recognize, this is not because I'm a great driver. This is not because I'm a great driver that I haven't gotten in an accident. It's because I've been lucky, because God has, given me that grace of the proper timings all the time. And really, any accidents I've avoided, it's not necessarily because of me.
Right. Yeah, it is amazing that that pride and selfishness, the two greatest downfalls of people spiritually.
So I guess you may have already talked about this some, but like, what are your tips for people, for young people specifically, maybe going through hard times, about how they should handle them and how they should view them? And I guess we've already a little bit talked about this, but just kind of phrasing it, like, what are your tips for like younger people or people in general going through hard times?
One of the big ones we talked about kind of was to look for examples. And if you don't know of people personally in your life, examples, read like Hebrews 11, where it's talking about all these things that people went through, people that didn't even ever see the reward that they were working towards. Like Moses never even making it into the promised land. Like, he's working all this time, going through all these hardships, never made it. And Abraham, going through all these hardships, never saw the day when his descendants were as numerous as the sands on the seashore, inhabiting the land. But so just keep those things in mind, and then having that mindset where how can this be a good thing? Like how can God use this bad situation? Maybe I just need to get through this and experience this so that I can talk to other people. I mean, who knows? You have a bad time, a hardship. Maybe that's a completely new mission field opening up for you. Mm-hmm. That you will be able to talk to these people that other people won't, because you've gone through the same bad thing that they have. So just have that proper mindset. How can this be a good thing?
That's good advice. I know some people in certain Christian circles now, they kind of have this view of, like, if something's difficult or challenging, then that's just, they would use the term like, that's a closed door. Like, God's just closing that door for them. That he's saying that's not the direction they should go. And so they say when there's something difficult or challenging, they just go do something else. What would you say about that kind of mentality of, like, viewing difficulty as God leading you in a different direction?
Well, it's definitely something to keep your mind open to, but at the same time, anytime someone talks that way, or they're saying, I was called to move here or to do this, a lot of times you can create that push in your own mind. Like God wants me to move here or leave here, and people use that to justify or give an excuse for so many different things. So I would caution people against saying that, because if in the back of your mind you really want to not be somewhere anymore, you're going to be looking for reasons. But one thing I've told myself, for like when times are hard or something, if it comes to relocating or changing a career, I can't just be doing this because I don't want to be here. I have to admit the different things that might be influencing what I'm wanting or what I think is a good idea. Like, if I'm making a decision simply because it's what I want, but maybe not because it's has spiritual merit that I can see, then I just need to understand that is influencing me. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. Even with finding out that because of the budget cuts that my position was cut, or that I was cut from my position, if I was really wanting to say, get out of Bemidji, go move somewhere warmer, I could use this as, oh, see, there we go, I gotta leave. And I mean, if it went on long enough, if I wasn't able to find a teaching job, then that's something that I would reevaluate. Like, okay, maybe this is just being God freeing me up to go somewhere else. So yeah, you keep an openness to the fact that you should move, but just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't say you're moving because God wants you to move, but really it's just that you want to. Mm-hmm. And you like, I don't want to do these hardships. I'd rather be here. We'll call it a closed door and then move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of things like that where there are very spiritual ways of saying you don't want to do something or saying no. So, for examples would be like,
it wasn't my gift.
It wasn't my calling. I was being called somewhere else in life. Or
giving up all my possessions to feed the poor just wasn't my gift. Some people have it. I wasn't given that gift.
I mean, yeah, and we laugh about that. But like, that's the same level of logic people use.
Yeah, hospitality is not my gift. Teaching's not my gift. People use different excuses like that. To get out of doing the work part of things. And like we said, there's some difficulties you just completely say, okay, God, I can't do the work. It's all in your hands. But there's a lot of hardships where you just have to be tough and get through it. And how many Bible verses are there where they acknowledge there will be trials, there will be hardships. We've told you this from the beginning. You're going to face these things as a Christian. So if a Christian is not facing those things for Christ, then they need to reevaluate whether they're really following.
Mm-hmm. Actually, something we talked about in our first podcast was the prosperity gospel, and how it's like one of the biggest myths in the Christian church, or the modern Christian church, is this idea that because you are a Christian, good things will happen to you. Mm-hmm. And that kind of undermines living with an eternal focus, because we should be thinking that when bad things happen, it doesn't matter, and because this is not our home.
Well, yeah, it's natural to wonder, okay, why did this happen? I mean, I'm doing the best I can. I don't need this right now. And I've had times where life's already tough, and then a car breaks down or something, like last year, even when the engine went bad on our car. I'm just like, oh, I don't need this right now. Why is this happening? It's not, I mean, yeah, and you gotta admit, as Christians, we bleed, we feel pain just like anyone else. And so we can't act like these things don't bother us and make ourselves unrelatable to other people. But at the same time, don't always ask, I'm so good, why are bad things happening? Ask, okay, how can I become better through this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very dangerous trap, I guess. And well, even like I think of like Solomon talked about it in Ecclesiastes, where he observing like here the same fate befalls both the fool and the wise man, or both the good and the evil. And I think several psalms are also kind of speak along those lines of like here the ungodly people are being really successful and living really rich lives, and then here I am not having that. I think the thing is to just remember that that's not really our goal. And
and some of those people writing the Psalms, I don't know how much they understood of heaven. Some of those people at that time. I mean, there's not earlier in the scriptures, there's not a lot of writings about heaven. There's earthly good for doing good, earthly bad for doing bad things. But even still, even if they had a clear vision of what heaven was, or that there was some afterlife where people would finally get what was due them, even then it's easy to ask the question, like, why are things so tough for me? And there's a lot of the Psalms where whether it's David or one of the priests or whoever wrote the Psalm, and they're looking at these people doing bad, they're like, God, how are you allowing evil to continue? Like, why are you letting them get by with doing all these evil things? And Jeremiah writes about that a lot. Like, how is this evil? How does it keep going, God? Why aren't you doing something about it? And
And even nowadays, that's a reason a lot of people look at Christianity and say like, nah, there's no God, because if there was a God, then where?
well, it's a double-edged sword, because partly the skeptics will say, well, there can't be a God because a God wouldn't let evil continue. He would judge these wicked people. And then the other side, they say, well, there can't be a God because how could he allow so much pain and suffering? Like, part of you wants him to inflict more pain and suffering. Part of you says there shouldn't be any. It's life. And surely Jesus went through more pain and suffering and hardship than most people do.
Yeah.
Especially us living in America nowadays.
And you think about what he told his disciples, and he told them that they were also going to go through all of those things. And sure enough, all of the 12 disciples were, brutally killed in one way or another. Well, I don't know about John.
Judas got himself.
Judas got himself, and I'm not sure exactly how John died.
They at least all got beaten. In Acts, they all got beaten, flogged, and put in prison.
Yeah. And yeah, so I guess it comes back to looking at life, or looking at this with everything with an eternal focus, is that it doesn't matter if we are treated unfairly in this world, because it's not what we're going for. That's not our goal. It's not success in this world, and health or riches or whatever in this world is not our goal ultimately.
Also, not a thing people want to hear when they're having hardships. Like, it's not helpful to them. Like, well, you do know that this stuff isn't important anyways. You should focus on eternal things. Sometimes you just have to come to those realizations yourself, I think.
Well, hopefully, maybe after a while of...
Yeah, a lot of wisdom knowing how to help people when they're in hardships.
You can't just go and say, yeah, all this time you've been enduring this hardship, it doesn't really matter. Except we are supposed to.
Probably the best thing, have a good relationship with people. Make it clear that you do sincerely care about them, and that you're not just sitting there to chastise them when they have bad times. So that they're willing to listen to you when the bad times come. For some reason, if someone's making a sacrifice, it's pretty hard to turn down a sacrifice. People are more unwelcoming towards the good advice that requires no sacrifice from others. And those are the most humbling kinds, when you know that someone else's life is more difficult because they tried to make mine better. That's a humbling thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we have it all figured out.
Yeah. We'll never have to worry too much about hardship or anything anymore. We'll just.
I've wondered at some of the latter times, like, all right, God, I think I learned this lesson already. Is there some other lesson I didn't get? Let me think back. Maybe if I remember quick enough, you'll take it away.
Well, I can. I know. For instance, like Mara has said things like that in regard with like her health issues and stuff. Like I thought I learned a lesson, but sometimes, God, I guess, just thinks you haven't learned the lesson, or he knows something. Well, obviously he knows something we don't, but
Yeah.
you just got to stick with it, I guess. And then I think with most of those things, you end up kind of forgetting all the hardship afterwards, mostly.
Yeah.
Well, like you mentioned, like you don't think too much about your cancer anymore, obviously, or
There was like 6 years where I even smelled certain types of soaps. And soap, if it smelled like the soap they had at the cancer center, I would get nauseous. So it stuck around for probably 5 or 6 years. But yeah, now it's more of a past memory. And maybe it's me forgetting, but like the greatest hardship, 2018 was a tough year because I had Lyme's disease and I broke my toe and I had just really tough classes all year, including the summer, I was working 50+ hours a week. Like, I felt like I was 65 years old. I felt completely broken that year. And just like financially, like things were tough and just everything was tough. But so that is what sticks out to me is the hardest moment in my life so far, but maybe that's just the most recent one.
It's quite possible. I think like the
teething's probably pretty hard. You see a baby teething, that's pretty hard.
Possibly. Well, I think like Jesus telling his disciples about like, well, one of the times he told them that he was going to be leaving them and die essentially, and then telling them that for now you'll have hardship, but later you will have joy and rejoicing. And he compared it to a woman in labor, you know. While
once the baby's born, you forget the pain.
Yeah, once
for
the
joy,
baby's
born.
Yeah, she forgets the pain, and it's replaced by joy. And so.
So would a woman in childbirth, now that you've experienced that, a woman in childbirth, do they want to be told that while giving birth? Maybe some do. Maybe some that'd be the extra push they need to push. But for others, they're like, oh, shut up. Don't tell me about it now.
I told Mary about it during.
You did? Well, I mean, but like when they're in the process of labor, it's like, hey, don't sweat it. There's going to be a baby. It's all going to be worth it. And that's easy for you to say.
It is easy for me to say.
But at the same time, with any other hardships or challenges, for us to tell somebody, hey, it's all going to be okay in the end, people definitely don't want to hear about that.
That's like the weakest form of trying to help someone is saying, it'll be okay. Especially when you have zero involvement.
Even if it's true.
Even if it's
most
true.
of the time it's probably true.
Most of the time it's probably true, but if you have zero involvement and they can see that you're going to do absolutely nothing to actually help them, then that's like one of the it's almost insulting to them that you know, just like, oh, it's going to be okay.
And maybe a mature person needs to learn to not be insulted by that. Like if you are someone who's really insulted by that, like to the point where you are automatically going to assume, oh, they really don't care for me. All they're doing is wishing me well and saying they're going to pray for me. Maybe that's something else where it's like, okay, if you aren't mature enough to be gracious and accept their kind words, then maybe that's what you need to work on. That and some humility.
Always goes back to humility.
So,
yeah.
I'm preaching on it in 2 weeks, so.
Oh.
He's thinking about it. Have any closing thoughts, Jonathan?
Well, this has been a good podcast episode.
Brought to you by water.
Yes. The water of life. Drink it once and you'll never need to drink again. Our sponsor is Jesus. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of weird to say that he's sponsoring us, but.
Well, I mean, theoretically, we wouldn't be doing this without that reason. So.
I don't know what to think about.
I'm not going to try to wrap
have to think about it a
I'm
little
not
bit
going to try to
before.
wrap my brain around that right now. So anyway, so we've talked a lot about hardship and pride and both dealing with hardship yourself and how to, with wisdom and discernment, approach others who are dealing with hardship. A lot of great things, I guess. And so I think that's going to wrap it up. This has been episode 14.
With Benjamin the Pope.
Benjamin the Pope. Go forth and be salty.